the fig tree down. It's not bearing any fruit.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Disgrazia.
They will not allow Donald Trump to be president. This is the twisted mind of the left. You're putting a Band-Aid over a problem that's not being addressed. It's thrown around too liberally, hate speech. Just because your feelings are hurt doesn't mean it's hate speech. So there are issues here that cross political lines.
It means that your libtard friends are not going to invite you over for Grey Goose and Pavois.
If you think that America is about you, you're just fool.
I got to show you something that has me aggravated. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Sunday Night Live, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Sunday Night Live, Joe, not Saturday Night Live. We're more entertaining than Saturday
I would agree.
Night Live. That's right. And let us go into the breach, brothers and sisters. We got a great conversation with you tonight. For you tonight, we have we're going to talk a little bit. Trump's getting arrested, at least according to him. We'll see how that rocks out. John Horvat's going to be a regular on the show, a regular contributor to the show. We're going to be talking about national divorce. All right. And then after we get done speaking with John, we'll just touch on all, much of the other insanity that's out there. And believe me when I tell you, there's plenty of it. So let's we have a clip. All right. Talking about Donald Trump getting arrested, according to him, on Tuesday. And according to the news, John, let's play that clip.
This morning with the new response from the Manhattan District Attorney to former President Trump's statement that he expects to be indicted. NBC News learning overnight that DA Alvin Bragg sent a note to his staff pledging they will be safe after Mr. Trump's calls to protest if prosecutors decide to charge him.
And I'm glad we cut that off because it's kind of nauseating, Joe Resinello. And there's so many layers here. There's so much to unpack. But here's my beef, okay? Guys like Alvin Bragg, they watched Antifa and BLM burn down cities, okay? They called that peaceful protest. That means if you and I went down to the district attorney's office in New York City, when he announces his indictment of Donald Trump, we're not allowed to do that. He had to assure his staff that they're safe from all those hairy-backed, ape-like, knuckle-dragging Trump supporters like Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Okay, and it couldn't be furthest from the truth. But here's my point. I'm going to hand it over to you in this. You see how they try to intimidate those who would legitimately protest what I think is just a really, really bad move on Alvin Bragg's part. But I'm not
100%
surprised that he's doing it. Go ahead, John.
First of all, Alvin Bragg is an activist, and if you ask me, he's not up for such a move, and I'll tell you why. Because Trump's lawyers will eat him alive. That's number one. Politically speaking, too, it's a foolish move. It's going to energize Trump's base. They've been trying to get him for, 6 years since, before the guy ran with the Russian hoax, all the way to his, 2 impeachments, to raiding his house. They've looked like fools all the way through. This is a bad political move, but the left always overplays their hand. To be honest with you, they have a legitimate shot of beating him. Sadly, because of election laws in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Wisconsin. And Georgia, rather. I mean, they have a legitimate shot of beating him. Just let it ride. But they can't. They have to overplay their hand. It's a bad move politically, Joe. Alvin Bragg is an activist. If you ask me, he's
Soros funded. He
shouldn't have that job. He's not equipped for that role. And he will get eaten alive. And to be honest with you, New York will look foolish.
Joe, let me ask you this. What does it tell you? And stick with us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We have John Horvat coming on in a few minutes. We're going to be talking about national divorce. I think that's an important topic, Joe Resinello. I know you do too. That's why we're going to have John on, because he wrote an article about it. Joe, he can win. That's what I'm hearing through the actions of DAs like Alvin Bragg. They know Trump can win. Joe, on a personal note, I work with somebody who's libertarian and atheist who voted for Trump the first time, okay? Who the other night was trying to convince me Trump cannot get the nomination. And I said, why? Why? Why can't we take a step back and say, I'm not buying into the media narrative. I don't like everything Donald Trump does. But if I go issue by issue, and along with a lot of Democrats, not the leading Democrats of the party, but rank and file Democrats, they say, yeah, I support that. I support standing up to China. I support reworking NAFTA. I support protecting workers. I support protecting the border. But it's like you said, Joe, the tribalism comes in where you got to be against Trump. Joe, my larger point is this. I think these actions show that they fear Trump can win. What say you?
Oh, 100%. I agree with you 100%. They do fear it. They fear also his policies. And keep this in mind. If Trump was to win, dude, he's going for blood. I mean, Trump is not going to be gentle. He doesn't have to get reelected. They know that as well. I mean, it terrifies them. But here's another thing. You talk about the idea that he could win. There could be a geopolitical event which propels him into the presidency. You know, COVID was an event that the Democrats basically used. You know, they basically exerted emergency powers. We saw that. We were seeing that all over the world. There's a lot of very, very, very dangerous situations going on in the world. Israel, Iran. You have Russia, Ukraine. You have China, Taiwan. There could be an event that happens geopolitically that propel him into the White House, and then all bets are off, to be honest with you. And they know it, and that scares them. I agree with you 100%.
And that's the thing. I mean, let's bring John Horvat in, and you know, because we're going to be talking to him about national divorce. Hi, John Horvat. How are you? Welcome back, brother.
Very good, John. Thanks for coming on.
And for those of you out there, you know John. He's been on our show, Tradition Family of Property, TFP. Go look it up. You'll see everything that John does in his writings. Now, John's saying, because okay, let me set the stage. Okay, MTG, okay, otherwise known as Marjorie Taylor Greene. All right, she's a representative from Georgia. She's calling for perhaps, okay, a national divorce. Joe and I are a little bit more sober-minded. Okay, even though we do think that through migration from blue states to red states, you can have a de facto divorce. But John has written an article why it's not a really good idea, probably not even practical, and moreover, it's not going to solve our problems. So, John Horvat, welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe, brother.
Great to be on. Great to be on.
So, why does her rhetoric, John, only add to the confusion out there?
Well, I mean, I think it's largely because she doesn't really address the problems. She just says, let's just separate. And the problems stay there. And the problems are on both sides. They're not just on one side that's all very good and the other side is very bad. Although, you know, they do tend to, one side tends toward good, the other tends toward bad, but it's a mixture of problems. And so you're not really resolving those problems. You're simply walking away from them and hoping they'll go away. And I don't think that's going to happen, and especially in our present situation and present state of decadence in which we are. I think it's just not going to. It's a utopic idea.
Joe Rossinello.
I agree, John. I'll be honest with you. I read your article. I agree with it 100%. I think it's trying to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Mm-hmm. It's a nice idea, mm-hmm. but it's not going to work. It won't work. But there is public sentiment, that people want it. Some people want it. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that could kind of frame it out, and then we'll take the conversation forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the polls say something like 37% of all Americans are, let's say, they agree to some type of divorce or succession. 60% or 66% of Southern Republicans. 52% of Trump voters, 44% of Biden voters. You know, there is a certain tension in the air, and so it is a very uncomfortable situation which we're living in. But it's so a lot of people just say, "I want out," and let's just walk out of it. Let's get out of it, and it is in a certain sense like a divorce situation.
John, let me ask you this real quick, okay? Given what the Supreme Court did with Roe versus Wade, and given some of the statements we've heard about, returning power back to the states, okay, where the Constitution does say if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, well, then those rights are reserved for the states and the people respectively, okay? See, even jamokes like us, John Horvat, we know a little bit about the Constitution. We don't have to have gone to Harvard. A lot of people might signal or think, hey, well, that's a hopeful sign. Maybe I'll leave. Now, this is what I mean by de facto divorce. Maybe I'll leave my blue state. Maybe I could transfer my job from New Jersey or New York to Florida, to the South, to Texas, perhaps, to Arizona, where I am. Okay. My job was transferable. Could we achieve a de facto national divorce? Okay. Because this is my view. I won't speak for Joe or you, because I think the Supreme Court has signaled they're going to return power back to the states where it belongs. And in that case, or at least I can control my own sphere of influence. I can get involved in local politics rather than national politics and really have an effect. Is that something that might be a little bit more feasible than what MTG is talking about?
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting together with other people who think alike, and even in communities that think alike. You want to, where you have other people. The worst thing is to stay alone and not get together with people. So there's nothing wrong with that. But in any state that you do move into, you're going to have blue people and red people in the same state, and you're going to still have to do some kind of fight inside that state. And plus, I'm an American. I want the whole thing. I don't like blue states being around. I want to take over the blue states too. I mean, it's just this idea of having blue states living there all by themselves, not being harassed, not having anything. It doesn't appeal to me. I want the whole thing.
I would agree with you on that. Joe Resinello.
In your article, you talk about like it's inextricably intermingled, and I like that because you use Texas as an example. You basically say, and Texas is, let's be honest. I mean, when people talk about this whole like idea of like a national divorce, it's always Texas is the model. They had their own country. Texas, the whole deal. But in your article, and I think it's a great point. The cities in Texas are liberal.
Yes,
Austin, extremely liberal.
Well, look at. I was going to say, look at the events in Austin recently.
Rioting.
Very recently.
I mean, but then you say like, then you're going to have almost separation of those states. You'll say, well, I don't want to be. It'll just cause another secession. And I agree with that. If you look at the most conservative states in the United States, North Dakota, South Dakota, Mississippi, these ideas, these cultural communist ideas, I mean, that's just what they are. I can't even call them democratic ideas. Some of these ideas that are getting floated around, they're in every single one of these states. And that's what you're saying. It's a disease. It's like cancer. It's spreading. You can't just think that you're going to say, okay, the Midwest is going to separate. Well, guess what? The cancer's there.
Right.
It's just as time goes on, it's going to metastasize. It's going to grow, and you're going to have the same problems. Maybe it'll take 50 years, but you'll have the problem.
Right. It will tend to fragment. Once you've admitted the principle that you can fragment, it will fragment into ever smaller pieces. And as anyone who's gone through a divorce, thankfully I've never done anything like that, but it's the logical. The next step is another divorce. That tends to go more and more because you've already gone through that barrier. You already know it's possible. So there's going to be more divorces, and it'll fragment the country.
I agree with you.
I want to give you just a little bit of my personal experience. And I live now in Arizona, which is considered a red state, okay, or at least for the most part, okay. Leaving aside any shenanigans in elections, it's probably a red state. But I go to work. I work in a wealthy part of Scottsdale, okay, where most people vote Republican. And I know many people that come into the place that I work, okay. And when the election here happened recently, the gubernatorial election and all that back in November, these people were telling me they were really cheesed off that Carrie Lake, was supporting the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. See, these are self-identified conservatives who are saying they don't like the fact that the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Well, let's say, for argument's sake, this was one of the states that MTG is talking about. Let's say we're all conservative. You know, we believe in free markets and
Right,
blah,
right,
blah, blah,
right,
and
right.
we pay lip
Yeah.
service to. Go ahead, John. You know where I'm going with that.
Right, exactly. I mean, what you have is we have two parties that are not that are not static parties. They're not just a party that has one position and another party that has another position. You have parties in which you have one position which have a lot of different nuances, and you also have cross parties. You know, but people getting mugged by reality, becoming conservatives, people becoming leftists. You know, it's a very dynamic situation that's taking place in our country today. And any type of divorce or civil war or something like that is presupposes that you have very defined parties on both sides.
John, I'm going to hand it over to Joe, but you know what when you were talking, what I was thinking about was the division. If that was to happen, a national divorce, hypothetically, the
Yes.
divisions would go back to being 50 states. Like, it would just go in a complete circle.
Right,
Because,
right.
because every group you might identify, we obviously identify as Catholic,
Yes,
but as lay people, let's say in America, obviously the Catholic voice is not unified.
yes,
I think that's just
absolutely.
plain as the nose on our face. But it seems to be funny is that, yeah, you'll start with two countries or two states, all right?
Mhm.
And eventually when the divisions occur, you'll go back to the original 50 that we have now. So maybe we should just start fighting with the
Right.
50 we have
With
now.
the picture we have now, and just keep going because um, the left has not won. We have not won, but we're still in the battle. And as long as there's a battle taking place, you know, there's a chance. There's a chance for our country.
Yeah, and listen, as far as the battle is concerned, I will tell you this, and Joe and I have experienced this now since 2018, since we started doing this. There's many people in our army, okay? They're
Mhm.
like yourself, okay? And
Oh,
we're
yeah.
in your army, like we're in the same army, and I think we're fighting the good fight. I honestly think that we're having a major impact, not just us
Absolutely.
individually. I'm talking about as a group, people who think like us, people of goodwill, okay? I think we're having an impact. I want to hand it over to Joe though.
John, a number of people are commenting in Rumble. We're streaming live there. They're saying that, say, a civil war is unavoidable. You're a historian. Joe and I are fairly versed in history as well. I mean, you see what happened in France, the French Revolution. You saw that in, say, Spain
Mhm.
with Franco. Very similar, Mexico. Very similar movements. That one could compare to what's happening here. Do you see it going in a direction? It's not going to be a war in that manner. I don't think warfare is the same. I mean, times
Mhm.
have changed, but is it going to come to a head? Because ultimately, I mean, it's just bubbling. It's bubbling,
Mhm.
bubbling. And I will say this, and I've said this to Joe Pasillo. Eventually, a conservative will win. I'm not saying it's going to be Trump. I can't predict the future, but you see that young gentleman. I can't think of his name. He's of Indian descent. He's very conservative. He's running
I
for
know,
president,
Yeah,
yeah, we
yeah.
know who you're talking about. They can look him up.
but he's highly educated, went to Yale. I mean,
Mhm.
the idea isn't dying, is my point, and eventually someone's going to win.
Mhm.
My point is, I don't think they're going to take it, John. I really don't. Like, I think, they always point to January 6th. I think that's going to be like Girl Scouts selling cookies.
Mhm.
Like when eventually a conservative wins, I think they're going to go berserk. What do
And
we do?
by the way, his name is Vivek Ramaswamy.
There we go.
Okay,
There we
there you
go.
go.
But
All
he's a
right.
Go ahead,
legitimate
John.
dude. I
Interested in
mean,
your comments on what Joe just was talking about.
Yeah, I think there is in a certain sense, a war of attrition going on as well, because the left is very exhausted. Its ideas are very exhausted. And if you read the leftist websites and things, they are very terrified by the Roe v. Wade, other things. They certainly are taking us very seriously, and they're really they don't have the same type of grassroots, the same dynamism as those on the conservative side. Even as weak as we are, they definitely have that. They don't have those certainties that they once had. They don't have that energy that they once had. So it is a war of attrition to say who's going to last longer, because it is coming to a head. And what will happen when it comes to a head, who knows? It depends on the situation of the country, a lot of factors enter into it. But it's someone's at some point it's going to have to be resolved. We have to find a point of unity that makes us a country, and we've lost that point of unity. The point of unity used to be a certain way of life, but now that way of life has been just spread all over, and we're going to have to go back to God. God is the only solution. That's
Oh, I agree, John.
Well,
John,
obviously, John Horvat joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Obviously, that is the bottom line. The
Yes.
problem is between now and then, when hopefully people will wake up, whatever form that takes, whether it's our Blessed Mother, like she did, in Guadalupe and changed the country of Mexico, whatever
Yeah.
form that takes, we don't know, but we have to promote these things in the meantime.
Right.
I firmly believe that what Joe and I are doing is out there fighting in the spiritual battle in our own way. Perhaps, John Horvat, just simply by opening your mouth and being truthful about things. I mean, that's what got Matt Walsh in trouble, because Matt Walsh turns around and asks this very simple question. What is a woman?
Yes.
As though we have to actually ask that question. And again, he's a bit of a satirist. So, he was poking a little fun. But we can't even agree. Now, John, you said it's going to come to a head where we're going to have to at least come to a certain point. John, the other side, and yes, there is another side, they don't agree on basic reality.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Now, you have to help me, brother. I'm asking you for your help. How do you talk to someone who doesn't accept basic biological reality?
Yeah, I mean, we find this a lot in our activism on campuses and things like that. That they don't. The time of rational arguments is really is gone, because they don't have rational arguments, and it's cursing, it's spitting, it's whatever. They come at you, and it's a curious idea. Is what you're reduced to what they call a fight of archetypes of how you present yourself. The type of person that you are, type of man that you are against their type. It's a clash of human types that you experience, and that says a lot more than many times the arguments we have. They say, well, these people are rational, they're calm, they're orderly, they're this, they're that, and these people are insane. So there is this clash of human types that is very, very strong, and impresses a lot of people. It impresses more people sometimes than arguments.
Yeah, and I hear you. Joe, we probably have time for one more question with John.
I just want to talk about your organization, because I really do think you have it right. And I'll tell you why on a couple of fronts. One, on the secular level, you address companies and organizations that go off the rails. You send emails to them, which implicates to them that there could be financial issues. I'm not going to support you if you do X or Y. That makes people think, because the bottom line drives many decisions, particularly in the corporate arena. Secondly, you pray publicly. I took your lead as a result of that. When Biden was elected, I saw that wide-eyed as far as where that was going to go. I knew how he was going to move, and he is moving in that direction. We must rely on God. You guys pray publicly every first Saturday. I've been there for 2 years, all over Bergen County, New Jersey, and I will do that. I think we have to rely on that factor. Our Lady crushed the head of the serpent. She can do anything. And I rely on that, John, because to your point and what you and Joe were just talking about, when there comes a point when you're talking to someone like, I don't know what a woman is. Well, listen, if you can't have that understanding, there's nothing I can do.
Joe, listen, back in the day in Newark, New Jersey, if that happened, like our fathers would have said, hey, listen, pal, I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know what to tell you, but Our Lady can
I don't know what to tell you.
Our Lady can fix that. And that's where what you guys do, and that's what I do. I take your banner, I stand on the street corner with a group of guys, and Our Lady can fix that. Talk about that, because I'll be honest with you. I think the discussions to a point have their purpose, but then there comes a point where it's like, we're not going to get anywhere here, but Our Lady can.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's why we have what we call the Public Square Rosary Campaign, where we're in October, the second weekend of October, we have 20,000 rallies across the country. and those are from a few people, 5, 6 people, to 100 people, or even more people. And these are public witnesses to say, well, we're out there, we're in the public square, we are praying for our country. And I was just surprised how it took off. We started in 2007 with 1,000 rallies, and said, well, let's see where it goes. 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. It only tends to grow as times get worse, because people are seeing that the natural solutions are not working, and we have to have a supernatural solution. And so we need to do everything possible we can in the natural sphere, but at the same time, I think St. Ignatius says you pray as if everything everything depended on God, and act as if everything depended on yourself. So that's pretty much what we have to do.
I think, you know what, John, that's a perfect place to end it, because I think that that's exactly right. That's what you guys are doing. That's what Joe and I are trying to do. Pray, pray, pray. Okay. And obviously we don't think, it's not a hypothesis. We know God's going to straighten out this ship sooner or later.
Right.
Okay. But yeah. When you wake up in the morning, do something. Go down to your school board. Don't worry if Merrick Garland is going to call you a domestic terrorist. Mark Houck and everything that happened to him down in Philadelphia. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Get out there. It's not just a saying, get into the breach. Get into the breach. John Horvat, you're the best, brother.
Thank you
so much
for coming on.
the show.
Great
Enlightening us as
article.
always.
Anytime. God bless.
All right, John, we'll talk soon, bro.
All right.
Joe, he makes all the sense in the world.
No,
right?
he does.
It's not.
I think he's good. I'll be honest. When I saw the article, I immediately reached out to him, because I think it's an easy route. It's easy to just say, forget about these people. We can't do anything. It weakens the country. It makes us vulnerable to our enemies, our international enemies, who are waiting to pounce. We have to fix this, and it can be fixed. By God's grace, it can be fixed. Catholics have a role. We have to step up. We have to get out of the boat.
No, Joe, listen. If we don't step up, we're gonna go, and we're gonna move on from this. But exactly right is, I don't want America to be separated. Now, if within America, if within the United States, there's a migration of more conservative-minded people to red states, more liberal-minded people to liberal states. Remember, Joe, one thing about liberals, if liberals in red states, they enjoy low taxes. Let's be clear about that, okay? There's plenty of rich liberals here in Arizona, Joe, that love the fact that they don't have their multi-million-dollar mansions in New Jersey.
Oh, I
because
believe
they'd be getting hosed, okay? So, just keep that in mind. But no, I want to fight for America. I think America is worth fighting for, and I don't want to give up on it. I think that we should, if need be, get together, as John Horvat said, with other people, maybe in more reddish states or red states, put down our roots there, exert our political power, or whatever we have, and fight the good fight. But no, I don't want a civil war. 600,000 people, Joe, died, okay, in our civil war. We don't need another civil war, because guess what? It won't be 600,000, Joe. It'll be a lot more than that.
And then also, Joe, to John's point, I think it's a pipe dream, because the cancer is in every state.
You're right.
And it's just from a practical perspective. It's a pipe dream. It's basically, if you ask me, it's almost like turning a blind eye, saying, I want a little bit of comfort for a little bit of, for a little while. It won't last. It won't last.
Well, if you have any love for your children or grandchildren, okay, if you have any love for them and you're worried about them down the road, well, then we have the responsibility to do something about that now.
Right. That's right. Listen, I wish it was so easy. Let me just put it that way. And I'm looking at it from that perspective. It won't work, because, like I said, you take Texas, the cities are liberal. Before you know it, they'll exert their influence. Before you know it, you want to divide Texas. You'll want to divide it again. You'll want to divide it again. And then our enemies will pounce. They're going, what do you think? Some guy in a tree stands in Arkansas is going to hold off the Chinese government?
No.
With his red man in his mouth and eating beef jerky after he gets in his truck.
But Joe, I'm going to say this. The left has to pull back from their insanity. They have to pull back, and we're gonna segue into another segment, okay? Where we have two clips we want to play you. We want to play you the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota talking about literally how if you're not a good parent unless you allow your children to transition, all right? And then we have a response that you might not have expected. So let's play her first, and we'll talk about that.
This is life-affirming and life-saving healthcare. When our children tell us who they are, it is our job as grown-ups to listen and to believe them.
No, it is not, okay?
The packs from Renew Europe, and they had written on values not for sale. African values can never be exchanged for European funding. That one can never. So I request that we define human rights so that we know the boundaries. Human rights, we don't involve issues of LGBT, we don't involve issues of abortion, because that is on the core of the African culture and society. I thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague. And
Now you see his response? That's the response that you have to give the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. First of all, let's talk about her for a second. Joe Resinello at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. All right. And by the way, if you're just joining us, follow Joe and I at Frontline TV on YouTube. Thanks to all of you. We are now over 85,000 subscribers. And by the way, we're going to get back to this topic, but I do want to mention, okay, that my brother-in-law, Joe Resinello, if you're interested in just a little bit of humor, okay, but also the truth, okay, go on our YouTube page at the Frontline TV and go look at all his Justin Trudeau videos, okay, and you will be enlightened as to what's going on in Canada, okay, and it's very important because obviously Canada, the United States, what's going on there, and woke culture is going on here. We have Biden, can't even call him a president, okay, but Justin Trudeau is not. He's not cognitively disabled, okay? He's young. His mind works well, okay? And that he is a better example of what we're fighting against. We would encourage you to go on there and look at those videos. I would encourage you to do that, okay? Everything is titled with Justin Trudeau. Watch them, okay? So follow us at the Frontline TV and help us out. We never ask you for money here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. What we do ask you for is 5 seconds of your time to share a video, to like a video, to subscribe to our channel, and also on Twitter, at with Joe and Joe, with Joe and Joe. And you could follow us on Twitter. We'd love for you to. But here's the thing, Joe, is that woman is insane. See, she is what we were just talking about with John Horvat. How do you reason with a woman who says, I have to listen to my kid? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, in all of human history, not just what they would call ogreish Catholic human history, where Catholic parents put the kibosh on their kids and keep them in handcuffs. No, all of human history. If you go back to the Incas, the Mayas, the Aztecs, if you go back to pagan Rome, I don't care where you go, at what era in history you go to, okay? No, parents didn't listen to their kids. And when their kids got a little sassy, you know what their kids got? A backhand. So she's off in that because she doesn't understand how families work. No, you don't listen to your children. Your job is to form your children. And when they say stupid things, when your little girl says something stupid, like I think I'm a boy, your job is to correct them, not affirm them. Okay. And here's the new mantra, Joe, and I'm going to hand it over to you, that mutilation, bodily mutilation, is now loving. It is an act of love. Because you don't want to call it bodily mutilation. You want to call it gender affirming surgery. Joe, please take this conversation.
Well,
further.
okay. She's a true believer. She's actually, I thought she was going to cry as she was talking. She's a true believer. And a lot of these people are true believers. Why? They're not grounded in anything, Joe. Oof. They're not grounded in anything. And that's what happens when you're not grounded in anything. A lot of these people don't have strong family roots. They don't have any religious grounding. And then frankly, what happens? You're like a boat on the ocean. That's number one. Number two, I agree with you 100%. A parent's job, an adult's job is to guide people. John Hopkins University has said this very clearly. John Hopkins, people, the best med school in America, maybe the world. 70 to 80% of young people that have these desires to transition to the opposite gender grow out of it. These are not my words. John McHugh. Paul McHugh. Paul McHugh. Look it up. You probably have to go to the 4th page of Google because it's buried, because Google doesn't want you to see it. But it's there.
Right.
Look it up. I'm not making it up. So ultimately, though, they're true believers. And getting to the African piece, Africa has their problems. This is not one of them. Why? This is a consequence of two things: a lack of founding and belief in God, number one, and number two, we're too comfortable, Joe. Our society versus, say, a society in Africa, people are much more like, I guess, like quick to say believe in God, to group together in family units when you can't eat. We're too comfortable. This is not a conversation. I got news for you. If something really bad happened in America, say a nuclear event happened and people, a third of the country died and food was scarce and water was scarce, do you think that these type of conversations would be going on?
Absolutely not. Absolutely
Not
not.
even in the slightest bit. So it's an apple and orange kind of society. So it's not really, while I agree 100% what he's saying, to compare it to, say, America, where the refrigerator's full, you go to the money machine when you need something, you have jobs, like it's a different, and also she's not grounded in anything.
Well,
And
no,
that's the root of that problem.
listen, if you look at a woman like her, if you look at a woman like Katie Hobbs here in Arizona, okay, they're cut Gretchen Whitmer, the Nazi over there in Michigan, okay,
Oh.
the Nazi governor in Michigan. She looks like the perfect Joe. She's the prototype of the female Nazi guard at Auschwitz. That's exactly what she looks like, Gretchen Whitmer. Okay, in other words, you will stay in your home.
Nurse Ratchet.
Yeah, she's Nurse Ratchet on steroids, brother. But when you I want to point something out to you. Okay, our lives, our entire lives, and before we were alive, we heard that colonialism was bad. The English in India was bad. The French in Africa, that was bad. The Italians in Ethiopia, that was bad. The English, in many parts of the world, it's all horrible. The Spanish, the Portuguese, going up the Congo, okay, bad, really bad. Okay, what's the difference between what they're doing now, Joe? They physically went in there. Okay, now let's take the negative part of colonialism. Let's just say, yeah, they went in there and they exported European values to these nations. But here's a guy that we just played a clip from, Joe. He actually values those Christian values that were brought to Africa, and he's actually living them. Okay, he's actually living those values, and he's saying to the Europeans, okay, that we don't want your secular values now. We have adopted this, and again, they didn't maybe even need Christianity for that, but obviously Christianity played a role. And then sending it back to them, saying we don't want that. Like you said, we have to eat. We have to eat. Okay, that's exactly where he's coming from. And my larger point is the hypocrisy, Joe Rossinello, is we were always taught that you can't impose Western values on other nations through colonialism. What are they doing now? The EU, everything about them is to impose that. So I love your comments on that, because guess what? You're the ones who said we're not supposed to do that. Yet you're the ones who are doing that.
Well, Joe, the woke ideology is a religion. They're doing that here. They say that we're intolerant and we force our views. I'll be honest with you. Okay, one could make that argument. I'm just going to be fair with abortion. They can make that argument. But as far as a belief system outside of that issue, outside of the marriage issue, same-sex marriage issue, say you remove that from that conversation, I don't force my beliefs on anybody. I don't say you have to go to church on Sunday. I don't say you can't eat meat on Friday. I don't say you even have to be Catholic, as it's a mandatory thing. I want everyone to be Catholic, but I don't force it on anybody. I'll talk it to anybody. I'll say it is the one true church. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
But at a point, we could just agree to disagree. I'm not going to beat you over the head. I'm not going to try to hurt you or penalize you. God proposes. He does not impose. Jesus didn't even do that. He didn't say, he didn't put down a hammer. I'm not, and I don't do that either.
Right.
But they do. They do. This is a religion for these people,
Well, I'm
Joe.
glad you.
And they
I'm
are
glad you said that.
it
I'm
is
glad you said that.
absolutely a religion. And any objective person has to agree with me. They're not having it. You can't even say in like polite company, yeah, I believe in traditional marriage. Why?
Oh,
Because
forget
I'm
it.
Catholic. I'm Catholic. There are two genders. Why? Well, because God created them man and women and man and woman. And science says in every cell of in every body's body, every cell, X or Y chromosome. You can't even say that.
Joe, did you see recently? You mentioned when John Horvat was here at the front line with Joe and Joe. If you're just joining us, we're way, way, way in the breach. You mentioned with John Horvat about Texas. Did you see what happened in Texas recently?
Well,
You
there was the
sound
riot in Austin.
no. Aside from the riot in the state Senate, okay, a state senator basically said what you just said. Said in the state Senate, reading it into the record, there are two genders. God created them male and female. He also mentioned Jesus when he said, "Those who bring sin to the little ones, a millstone should be hung around their neck and dropped in the ocean. It would be better for them if that was to happen." Notice he was quoting these things. And another member of the state Senate in Texas, this is Texas, Joe. He said, well, I have two transgender kids. First of all, you don't have transgender kids. Transgenderism, as Michael Knowles said, needs to be eradicated, not the people, because that's what the Rolling Stone magazine said. That's what the New York Times said. He did not say that. But do you see this broken man who will say that he's got two transgender kids? No, you're a failure as a parent. That's what you are. If you're going to say in public that you
But
have
in
two
all
transgender,
honesty, Joe, he's just a person like that, Joe. They're true believers. There's a point that you have to. I know what you're saying. I get it, but they are lost. It's like looking like you could say someone who's a drug addict. They failed in life. They made bad choices, but there's an element of weakness and loss. And I'm not saying weakness as I'm strong and you're weak. What I am
right, right.
saying is their life. There's a pit like it, I look at a lot of this. I compare it as a Catholic to Christ when he looked in Jerusalem and he wept for the city. And he says, because they did not know the time of their salvation. Well, I look, and I'm not saying that I'm God, and I'm not saying that I'm Jesus, and I'm not saying I know everything, but I am saying this. I see very clearly the consequences of those choices. I see them as clearly as I can look out the window, and I feel utterly and absolutely sorry for you. As a human being to another human being, you have made such a poor choice. That is how I would address that man. It's not about you're a bad parent, you're a bad person. Sir, I say this to you with absolute and utter love for you and your family. You have made a horrendous choice that has done damage to your children and
And
will
you,
do generational damage, Joe.
Joe, there's a video going around. I wanted to play it tonight, but we didn't have time. I didn't have time to download it. But it's a rally. I don't know if it was Washington or a state capitol. I apologize to all of you. I should be up on these things, but I looked at the video briefly. But what I did glean from the video, okay, is I hope a movement now in America against transgenderism by those who self-identified as transgendered who are now mutilated. And most of the times, Joe, they're kids. They're legal minors.
Joe, it's
They're below it.
it's a Holocaust.
Joe,
It's a Holocaust.
this girl got up there, all right, and it was her first public announcement since she had been mutilated, okay? I almost cried. I think I was crying. And I'm not a mush, but I was crying, okay? And the girl said, I had a mental disorder. I had problems. that no one addressed. Not my parents, not the doctors. They just went ahead and they cut off my breasts. That's what they did. Okay. And it was a 30-second thing at the microphone because you could tell this is a very shy girl. Okay. And she wasn't comfortable speaking this in public, but she felt she needed to. There's the result of transgenderism.
Joe, this is going to be looked at as a social experiment 30 years from now, 40 years from now, as a Holocaust.
I hope.
And like, this is, like I said, you take that senator from Texas. Joe, this is what happens when you don't ground yourself in God. I am telling you this, and I'm not going to get preachy, but what I am going to say is this. That is reality. Society looks at people who are religious, and they basically say, you're not living in reality. No, sir, I actually am. And my life is extraordinarily functional because of the reality in which I live in. Extraordinarily functional. And they cannot or will not understand that. And that is where the root of all our problems, Joe, come from. Our lives are grounded in nothingness. And that's why that man exists. And he is doing damage to his children.
Right.
Damage. It's sad.
Did you see in the clip of the Nigerian gentleman there? Did you see in that clip where he was talking about Joe Rossinello boundaries? This is what we've lost. We don't have any we have by the way, this goes to conservatives too. We're not just beating up on the left here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe, there's a lot of conservatives that turn freedom into an idol. And they have a perverted notion of what freedom is. They actually, in a childish way, and yes, if you believe that freedom is the ability to do anything you want, then you're thinking like a child.
Well, they're not grounded either, Joe.
Well, no, they're not.
That's grounded in, I don't care what you call them. That's grounded in stupidity.
Well, that's the thing. And then when somebody fights against transgenderism, or they fight against, let's say, gay marriage, or they fight against abortion, a lot of these same people who will identify, in many cases, Joe, as conservative or conservative/libertarian. I don't know what you're conserving. You don't even know what the basic definition of freedom is. You think that freedom is the ability to do whatever you want, and you're totally secure in your person, believing that. You believe that that's the way it should be. In the meantime, these people really don't know what they're talking about. Because then if that's the case, then that girl who I just described, then basically their attitude would be, well, she made a decision. I don't have to worry about her. Like that's, you know what I mean, Joe? Like what that view of freedom leads to in a nation,
it's chaos.
Is indifference. You don't care about your fellow human. As long as you could say they're an adult, that seems to be the rationale. Hey, they're a consenting adult. They could do what they want. And why can't you just let people be happy? That's what you hear. That's so, Joe, that is such a vapid view of what freedom is.
Joe. That's a superficial, that's like ridiculous. That's like the idea of a child who wants to eat candy for breakfast. Yes, you'll be happy, but your teeth will rot out of your head.
I mean,
this is what it is, Joe. And again, a lot of my frustration when seeing this type of behavior, people don't connect the dots. I always say this to people because it's true. You tell a tree by the fruit it bears. People rationalize. They'll see somebody, like we'll use John Horvat. John Horvat's life is ordered. Those men are ordered people. They'll rationalize that away. They'll call them names. They'll do this. They'll do this. How about you look at your own life in a sober, clear-eyed manner and connect the dots from decision to outcome? That's what's not going on.
Joe, I'm going to stop you right there for a very important reason, okay? Because I want to talk to everybody who's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe and I know that as we grow our audience and we reach out there, that those who would oppose us, they call us haters. They say that we don't love people, okay, because we speak the truth about things. Joe, what you just said about the recognizing the decision to do something and then the consequences. I want to play you a clip, Joe Resinello, and all the people joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Here's a woman who my heart is
Oh, it's
broken
sad.
for. Joe, I could cry. My heart is broken for this woman. I hope she hears this video and comes on our show and wants to talk about it. Maybe. Okay, we'll show all those so-called compassionate people out there what true compassion is. Show this, John. Play this video of this woman, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
How hard abortions are on a woman. It's probably been a month, and I hate myself every day.
Who's there for her, Joe? Who's there for her? She says she hates herself every day. John, can you play the rest of the clip? All right, perhaps we can. Maybe, maybe
no, we don't have it. It's okay.
We don't have the rest of the clip. She goes on in that video. Now you could tell from that video that she recently has had an abortion. Okay, and she goes on to talk about she's dead inside. And nobody's there for her, Joe Resinello. Planned Parenthood's not there for her. In other words, and she knows, Joe. She knows intuitively. She knows that what she did was a disaster.
I'm going to tell you a story.
Go ahead, brother.
There was a friend of mine. When we were in our 20s, his girlfriend got pregnant and they got an abortion. And they went to a hotel room after the fact. And a bunch of us went over there after the fact. He grew up in a Christian Catholic home. They weren't, though, like rosary praying Catholic, at least to my knowledge. But, anyway, first thing he said to me, I didn't say a word, and first thing he said to me, I'm going to hell. That's what he said. I swear. And why do I bring that up? There's something inside of you when you do something wrong. And I'm not pointing fingers. That snaps.
Yeah.
It's in you. And why? And you said she has no one. She has Jesus. I know.
No.
I don't want to go. And this is why you see people going crazy on this issue. Many of those people, I don't know who they are, could have been involved in an abortion. And as a Catholic, we have a place to go, Joe, to put our sin. When you don't live in that type of manner, like, I'll be honest with you. And again, I'm not preaching, so please, I'm just telling you the answer to that. She has to go to confession. Because I got news for you. That type of action will rot you from the inside out. It's like cancer.
Yeah.
And that is the only place you can take it. Now, someone could say, that's psychological. You're crazy. No, I am not.
No, it's not psychological.
It is not. And if you would try it, maybe you wouldn't say that to me.
Right.
That's why you're seeing the outrage and the screaming and the vitriolic attitude. It's woundedness. It's that girl. She's broken.
Right.
And there's a lot of things in life. And that's the truth.
No, Joe.
Truth.
No, Joe, listen, like you said, you're not preaching. I don't consider that to be preaching. Female KC Royals fan, our friend, is in the chat room. She said the girl needs Rachel's Vineyard. And we've, Joe, what's her name? Teresa, I forgot her last name, that we interviewed from Rachel's Vineyard here.
I know. I can't believe Bonapartis.
Yeah, Teresa Bonapartis, Rachel's Vineyard, okay? Joe, the greatest witnesses to life in the pro-life movement are post-abortive women. Okay. They're like that girl. And I'm going to pray for that girl specifically, that she goes and finds Rachel's Vineyard, because they'll point her to Christ, as according to what you said, because it is a Catholic apostolate, and they'll point her in the right direction. That girl is going to become, I think, because she's a month out from her abortion and she's devastated. And the problem is this too, is there's two roads to go. And I say this, I've said this a million times on the show, just because, let's say, I as a man could never have had an abortion. I've done some atrocious things in my life. There's two ways to go, Joe. Only two. Either despair, which leads to a ruined life, okay, and nothing but regret and hopefully not, but suicide. or there's healing. As a person, this girl needs that healing. As a nation, Joe Resinello, we need that healing. No, it's because
Joe,
what we're looking for is to go down
100%.
that road and keep going and going and going and going. And I forgot who said it. No, you know who said it? C.S. Lewis said it. If you're on the wrong road, okay, if you're going down the wrong path, and two people are going down the wrong path, and one recognizes it, okay, stops where he is, turns around and goes back to the beginning where they came from, that's the one who's the most progressive, not the one who continues down the road.
I would agree with that 100%. And some people would say, well, that works for you. It wouldn't work for me. Wrong. Wrong. Joe, some of it has to do with pride. Some of it has to do with I can't get the words out of my mouth that I was wrong, which is pride. But ultimately, we all want to be healed. And as a nation, we need to be healed. This nation is wounded, and the wounds are crying out. All of this behavior that you see is nothing but wounded people. And
Yeah.
again, you tell a tree by the fruit it bears. Now, that doesn't mean anyone's perfect, and God knows I'm not. But what I am saying is this: these ideas, and we just showed you one of them, are not working. And here's another bit, and they won't work. They are not working, and they won't work. And we have to put on our big boy pants and basically say, and look in the mirror and say, I have done X, Y, and Z, and this is the wrong road, and I have to change.
Yes.
Me. That begins with me. That begins with a confession. And
Well,
that's where that girl has to go. And
right.
then she gets better.
Right, because what's going to happen is if she confesses like Michelle Williams did, and we brought her up on the show at an award show, and she confessed her abortion to all her Hollywood friends, there's nothing healing about that. This woman needs real sacramental confession. Listen, Joe, but you've gone through it. I've gone through it. We're coming to the end of the show. The bottom line is this: a person knows without having been told when they're healed and when they're not healed, when they've actually been forgiven. Carl Jung said it the best. He goes, if my patients availed themselves of Catholic confession, because I'd lose my client base, because I wouldn't even have clients. And Carl Jung was pretty well known as a psychologist, and that's the truth. Because what happens in confession is real. Not that therapy is not helpful. Okay,
No, people need therapy.
Helpful.
There's people definitely that need therapy.
Therapy
That's
can
real
be helpful, but ultimately, if therapy is not grounded in something objective, as in Allah, the mercy of Jesus Christ, okay, well then it might have a short-term effect, but it's not going to last you the rest of your life. Joe, we got to leave it there, unfortunately. We want to thank you all for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We went way in the breach tonight. Now, we're going to ask you a favor. We don't want money from you. Joe and I are not asking for money. What we are asking you to do is wherever you're watching this video, share it somewhere. Help us out. Click a like, click a subscribe, share it with your friends, share it on Rumble, share it on YouTube, share it on Twitter, wherever you're seeing it. Just help us out in that way. Joe and I are growing our audience with the help of our producer, John, up in Canada, John Ross. And we're doing very, very well. And we think that what we are saying, people like, but mainly because we're just trying to tell the truth. We're just trying to bring the light of truth to a lot of the nonsense that's going on out there. So as always, we love you. We ask for your prayers. We ask for your support in any way you can. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon. Tired of doing business with companies who don't share or support your beliefs? Then you need to switch from your current phone company to Charity Mobile. Charity Mobile is the pro-life phone company. 5% of your monthly plan goes to support the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice. There are no contracts, and Charity Mobile makes it very easy to switch. Act now, because for a limited time, new customers who mention the offer code Joe and Joe get a free phone with free activation and free shipping. Chat with us online at CharityMobile.com or call us at 877-474-3662.